The Supreme Court has just made a decision about New York's concealed carry law. Now, if you're not familiar with New York's concealed carry laws, essentially, if you wanted to get a concealed carry license in New York, you could not get one if you wanted it for self-defense. You can get what they call a restricted license to go to a gun range or to carry a gun when you're out hunting or something of that sort. But if you wanted to get a concealed carry license to carry a gun for protection when you're out about in public, you couldn't get one. Except unless you had a special need, as they like to call it. And essentially what that means is, unless you're like a celebrity, a political figure, or you have a ton of money, you could not get a license to carry a gun just for self-protection. Now, in this case, the two guys who actually were suing for this case, one of them was able to get a bit of a less restriction in that he was allowed to carry it to and from work, but that was it. But he still felt that that was a problem because he's like, why can't I carry a gun general purpose to protect my life? Because I never know when I might need it to protect my life. Anybody with a brain understands this, but because New York doesn't respect the Second Amendment, or the leaders in New York don't believe in the Second Amendment because they think somehow because they are a metropolitan area, the Second Amendment doesn't apply to people living in the cities, they won't allow you to do this. So they sued, these two guys sued all the way up to the Supreme Court to where we are now here today. Now, New York is not the only state that has this. There are about 6 other states and a bunch of cities that have this type of special needs requirement in order to get a license to carry for self-defense. Now, keep this in mind. There are about 6 states like that in other cities. However, the way these states are broken down is there's a shall issue state and a may issue state. These states that have this special requirement are called may issue. They may give you a license if they feel you have a justified need to have it. Then you have shall issue states where basically is they have some basic fundamental requirements, and once you meet those requirements, you automatically are given a license to carry for self-defense. What this ruling does now is basically remove that whole may issue requirement, and now it is a shall issue. So New York needs to go and establish certain requirements that automatically allow people to carry a firearm once they meet those baseline requirements. So here's what the Supreme Court did to determine whether or not New York's law was in violation of the Constitution. They started by saying, look, does this special need restrict people's rights under the plain language of the Constitution, i.e. the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed? And if it does actually do this, does this restriction fall in line with the historical understanding of regulating the Second Amendment? So what the court did was actually go back and look through 7 centuries of documentation to determine whether or not there's actual historical context where there was restricting people's right to carry a firearm based purely on the notion that they were carrying one for self-defense. The court recognized, yes, there were some restrictions. However, there's no historical context where they actually restricted people's right to carry a firearm purely based on the ability to do so for self-defense. There are other reasons, but not because I wanted to carry one for self-defense. It's too broad. So New York's argument against this was, well, no, we want to prevent people from carrying guns in what they determine to be sensitive places. Essentially, New York's trying to say because we are an urban environment and we have a lot of people, we don't want people carrying firearms because we think it's dangerous. And therefore, carrying guns in public in New York is considered a sensitive place. The court said, yeah, there is some historical context in that you couldn't carry guns in government buildings and schools and so forth and so on. But to say that simply being in a public space in a city, that would literally mean that anybody in a city would not have the ability to carry a firearm. If the New York law was applied the way that they want to apply it, then no one in the city would be able to carry a firearm, i.e. restricting your right under the Second Amendment immensely. At the end of the day, what the court said was, look, we look here, it says right to keep and bear arms. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. So it's plain as day, bear meaning to actually carry a firearm. So that's within the Second Amendment. And then on top of that, we have no history of the ability to carry firearms for self-protection being restricted. Yes, they were restricted for other things, but not for simply wanting to have one for self-defense. What's interesting was the dissent. The dissent essentially read, honestly, like it was written by the anti-gun lobby. they didn't make any legal argument as to why you shouldn't be able to carry a firearm for self-defense. They simply said, we have a bunch of people who are dying every year from gun violence, and therefore New York has a right to try to do what they need to do in order to stave off those gun deaths. But then Alito came back in and wrote a concurring opinion, and he was like, that's actually why people should be allowed to carry a firearm, because there are these actual threats to people. And that is historical. People carry a firearm to protect themselves. So why would you then restrict people's ability to carry a firearm when they want to carry it to protect themselves? That makes no sense. So what New York is going to do now is try to restrict as many places as possible from people carrying firearms.
And I have to make sure that we can get the law changed in place in a couple of days to be able to have restrictions and to talk about sensitive places. We will have the right to stop concealed carries from individuals from carrying a gun into a sensitive place. I'm going to define those sensitive places. I assure you, we are not going to allow this to happen on our subways. We just had a shooting a few weeks ago. I'm not going to allow it in your schools or churches or all kinds of places. So we're going to be crafting that language right now.
Which is going to make it so tough for people to carry firearms because they never know where they're going to go and whether or not they can come in or not come in with their firearms. They're going to make it so hard that people are going to be like, there's almost no point. Yes, you technically can carry a firearm in the public. And yes, technically I have a concealed carry permit that allows me to carry my firearm. But what's going to happen is if I need to go somewhere, and we all know that New York heavily relies on public transportation, but I'm not going to be able to go anywhere because I can't use the subway now because I'm carrying a firearm because New York is calling it a sensitive place. And then from there, I can't go into any other buildings because what they're going to do is they're going to say, well, this building is considered a sensitive place and therefore you can't carry a firearm. Then we're honestly going to be right back where we are now and having to deal with whether or not these types of restrictions are actually an infringement on our rights and go all the way through the process once again. So even though this is a major win, we are not out of the water yet because New York is going to do everything in its power to make carrying a firearm, even with a concealed carry permit, as hard and arduous as possible, that it's almost going to be pointless. So that's how New York is going to play this game. Right now they're saying, do you have a special need? The court said, no, you can't use that. That's unconstitutional to give out permits or not give out permits. So New York's like, okay, cool. We'll give people, they're going to say, cool, we're going to give people the ability to get these permits. Here, you can have a permit to carry a gun for self-protection, but guess what? You can't carry it here, 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 and here because they're considered special places. And therefore, you can't carry your guns there. But you can carry your gun everywhere else. See, we gave them permits. That's exactly what New York is going to do. And this is for all the people who are in the middle. I want you to listen and I want you to watch the way that the people who are pushing for gun control are reacting to this decision. Because this decision is saying nothing more than, yes, people have a right to carry a firearm to protect themselves in public. That is literally all this case is saying. And right now, you have every anti-gun group, you even have anti-gun politicians, and even our own president who is saying that this was not the right decision. So what they are saying is they do not believe that you have the right to carry a firearm for your protection. What happened to reasonable? What happened to, I'm all for the Second Amendment, but what happened to that? I can tell you what happened to it. It was bullshit from the start. These people do not agree with the Second Amendment. It's not about making reasonable gun control laws. It's not about trying to compromise. There's no compromising because the only people who are giving anything up are the people fighting to protect the Second Amendment. When you have a compromise, it's two people coming to the table and each party walking away with something. But when we talk about firearms in this country, they want us to come to the table with them and then they walk away with something and we walk away with less than what we walk to the table with. That is not a compromise. That is a concession. Read through the lines. Look at the way these people are reacting. They don't want you to have guns, period. This is not about compromise. This is not about, oh, reasonableness. No, they do not want you to have a gun. In New York, you cannot get a permit to carry a gun to protect yourself. It was so bad they had to take it to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court held that that law was unconstitutional. People should be allowed to carry a gun to protect themselves. And when they said that, all the people who were talking about reasonableness, why can't you compromise, are now screaming bloody murder because the Supreme Court said you do have a right to protect yourself with the firearm in public. That is who we're fighting against. It's not us being extreme. You give them an inch, they want to take a mile. That's how this works. But they know they have to do it incrementally. They want to get to the point where they can ban handguns, but they don't want to give anything. So when they actually lose something, i.e. the ability to restrict people's rights in New York to carry a firearm to protect themselves, all of a sudden they're mad. That being said, I know you see the hat. I am the militia. We before only had this design in our shirt format. I'm glad to say now we have it in hat form, and I'm pretty excited about it because I love this hat. And yet again, this is a constant reminder that you are your own first responders. Right now, the irony is in New York, crime is through the roof. People are getting mugged like crazy. People are getting robbed like crazy. There's shootings, you name it. Even with their super strict gun laws, all these things are still happening in New York. And a lot of people in New York don't have the ability to protect themselves because they can't get a license to carry a gun in public to protect themselves. So the only people who have them in New York right now are the criminals. And clearly the cops aren't doing a good job of it, because if they were, that wouldn't be an issue right now, but it is. So remember, you are your own first responder. You are your own militia. Don't let anybody else tell you differently. You know, we talk a lot about empowerment in this country, except for when it comes to the Second Amendment. However, I can't think of anything more empowering than having the most effective tool to protect you and your family. So help me spread this message by liking and sharing this video with everyone you know. And don't forget to subscribe and leave a comment, because the Second Amendment, when it said militia, it wasn't talking about the government. It was talking about you. Also, if you want to know where to find the I'm the Militia shirt and merchandise, click the I'm the Militia link in the description section of this video. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel. And most importantly, make sure you hit that bell symbol.